over to Niamh, and I'll ask Niamh to give her presentation here. Thank you.
Thanks, Seamus. My name is Niamh Kellaghan. I work in Feedingstuff's Fertiliser, Grain and Poultry Division. So this is a little bit like the pre-takeoff checks on a flight. I'm going to switch off my camera now just so that you can have full screen view, and I'll just check, Tom, that that all those things are working. So I'm just going to switch off the camera now, and hopefully you can hear me and see me okay. So as I say, I work in Feedingstuff's Fertiliser, Grain and Poultry Division, and I'm joined on the panel today by my colleague Colm, who's in the same division, and as Seamus mentioned in the audience, a number of my colleagues are joining us, and these colleagues are the people who perform the house profiles on the on the free range barn and caged units leading to the registration. So if I just give, so an overview of what I'm going to look at today is the registration process for table egg producers. So that's all producers, free range, barn, organic and eggs from caged hens. I'm going to go through some house profile calculations and look at some similarities and some divergence in those calculations between the free range, barn and organic systems, and then some further information. And as Seamus has said, we'll have question and answer session at the end. Feedingstuff's Fertiliser, Grain and Poultry are responsible for the registration of table egg producers, and this registration process is specified in Council Directive 2002/4 EC, and the data that's required for registration is the name and address of the establishment, the name and address of the keeper, and the name and the address of the owner if different from the keeper. The farming method must be recorded, so this is free range, barn, organic or eggs from caged hens, and most importantly in terms of what we're talking about today, the maximum capacity of the house. And this is where the house profile for these 4 different types of farming come into play, in that the house profile determines the maximum capacity of the house. I should say, in relation to what our staff in Feedingstuff's Fertiliser, Grain and Poultry Division do, we're responsible for the registration and of these producers and the maintenance of that registration database, and we also are responsible for enforcement of food safety and marketing standards in these establishments. And the reason, as specified in Council Directive 2002 for the registration, is to allow the competent authority, so in that case this is DAFM, and within that it's our division, to provide a distinguishing number for each egg producer, and the distinguishing number is the medium then that is used to trace eggs that are placed on the market for human consumption. So if we can just show you the registration process of table egg producers. So in the case of free range eggs, barn egg producers and eggs from caged hens, our division complete the house profile for these 3 farming method types, and using the figures from the house profile then we determine the maximum capacity of the house. And in the main, the components from the house profiles that we use for these 3 types of farming method stem from Council Directive 1999/74 EC. And you'll see on the right hand side then for organic eggs, our division complete a registration inspection, but the maximum capacity of the house is determined by the organic control bodies. And in this case, this is done so because a lot of the components and the requirements and the parameters for the organic egg production systems differ from the other three and are set out separately in organic legislation. And just, you'll probably all be well aware of this, but going back to the distinguishing code, once we complete the registration process, each producer is given a distinguishing code based on the farming method system. So 0 on the egg signifies organic, 1 signifies free range, 2 signifies barn, and 3 signifies eggs from caged hens. The next 2 digits or letters in the sequence signify the country. So in most cases, you'll see IE for Ireland. UK 9 is the Northern Ireland designated number, and UK 5 is for Britain. The next set of letters that you'll see specify the county. So in this case, on this egg, we have R, which is County Monaghan. And the final set of digits are the unique producer code. So this is the distinguishing code that allows the egg to be traced back to the farm of origin once it's placed on the market. Just to give some context to the audience on organic production in terms of organic egg production levels in Ireland. Currently there are 42 registered organic egg producers. Of these 42, the laying houses vary in size from 3,000 birds, which is the max, to sometimes less than 1,000 birds. So you can see that you would be dealing with some of the pictures to illustrate on the right hand side of the screen. You know, some quite large premises, and some smaller to medium premises, and also in terms of organics, some mobile units. And just in the context of the other 3 systems then, in terms of organic, as I said, there's 42 producers, there's 177 free range, currently 6 barn, and 36 producers involved in enriched caged egg production. So that's overall 261 producers on the register in January 2021. And I suppose what we have seen in terms of trends over maybe the last couple of years is a slight increase in organic production and free range. Barn has actually fallen slightly, but we anticipate that this may begin to rise again in light of market, I suppose, pressure to move away from enriched cage. And the enriched cage systems has stayed relatively static over the last number of years. So just to look a little bit at the house profiles themselves, these slides, next 2 or 3 slides, compare some of the main requirements that make up the house profiles for both the free range and the organic. It doesn't cover them all, but it covers some of the main requirements, and just to also, I suppose, the important points to maybe take away are the differences in terms of what's required for free range and what's required for organic, and what's laid down in the organic legislation. So to begin with, I suppose, and what I'm concentrating mostly on today is the usable area. And this is applicable to the organic systems. And the usable area must be at least 30 centimetres wide, with a floor slope not exceeding 40% and with headroom of at least 45 centimetres. And nesting areas are not included. So this is one of the parameters that must be taken into account when completing the house profile. And you can see from the slide then that the number of hens allowed is 9 birds per metre squared for the free range system, but it's 6 birds per metre squared on the organic system. On the calculation of the usable area is slightly different in terms of the organic, in that the veranda is taken into account. But when I say slightly different, I suppose it depends on the eligibility of the veranda given the derogation in the new organic regulations. And Odile is going to go into this in more detail in her presentation afterwards. In terms of purchase, you'll see again for free range coming from Council Directive 1999-74, it's 15 centimetres per bird with no sharp edges, and some other parameters, about 30 centimetre horizontal distance, and the distance between the perch and the wall must be at least 20 centimetres. So it's minimum 15 centimetres per bird, but in the organic regulation it's 18 centimetres per bird. In terms of nest boxes, for free range it's 1 nest per 7 hens, and similar for organic, but in terms of group hens, again there's a difference. So for organic there must be 120 centimetres squared per laying hen. And if you can recall from the previous slide, nest boxes cannot be counted in the calculation of the usable area. Feeders and drinkers, and Odile will go into those in more detail in her presentation on the actual house profile, are similar in terms of pop holes, and for free range they must be 35 centimetres high and 40 centimetres wide and extend along the entire length of the house, and there must be 2 metres per group of 1,000 birds. Again, Odile will go into it in slightly more detail on hers, because in the organic regulations now there are internal and external pop holes. So there are internal which go from the house to the veranda, and there must be 4 metres of those per 100 metres squared of usable area. So we're back to that measurement again, the usable area. And for external, for internal, then they must be adequate in size. So they're not as specific on the they're not as specific on the height and the width. Vegetation, 4 metres squared per bird on free range and organic. So that allows in both scenarios 2,500 birds per hectare. Again, similar for both farming methods. You'll probably know that in terms of Borbia requirements, some of these parameters are different, and the free range area would be one of those. In terms of the parameters for the vegetation, the boundary of the vegetation is not supposed to be more than 150 metres from the nearest pop hole, but there's an extension of up to 350 metres permitted if sufficient shelters are given, and that's sufficient shelters is a minimum of four per hectare, and that is similar now for organics. I think that's possibly being introduced again in the new legislation. In terms of levels within the house itself, for the free range, 4 levels are permitted. For the organic, it's 3 levels, and the other parameters are pretty similar after that. For both systems, there must be 45 centimetres of headroom between the 2 levels. Droppings you must prevent the droppings from falling on the level below. The system must be constructed in such a way to allow easy inspection of the birds and ease of movement between the levels for the birds, and ease of access to feed and water. So just in terms of the overview, I suppose the thing to note from my presentation anyway is the introduction of the usable area. And as I said, both the free range and the barn and the organics must calculate the usable area as part of the calculations used in the house profile. And for the free range and barn, this comes directly from Council Directive 1999-74, and for the organic production, it comes from Regulation 848 of 2018, which refers you back to the definition as per the Council Directive 1999-74. So just to have a look in terms of the actual completion of the house profiles and the internal fixtures and fittings and areas that you look at. Again, in terms of the perching, you'll recall that it's 18 centimetres per bird for the organics, but in terms of the usable area, you must examine that the perching fits into this, in that it provides clearance, that 45 centimetres, etc. Clearance, so that any area under the perching can be included as usable area. In terms of the feeders, you will come across possibly a range of feeders depending on the size of the enterprise. So we have some track feeders, and you'll possibly have pan feeders. In general, just by the nature of the feeder itself, it won't have the clearance of the 45 centimetres off the ground, so would have to be the area under or taken up by the feeders would have to be deducted from the usable area, or the calculation of the usable area. Similar for drinkers, again, depending on the type and size of the premises that you're completing the house profile for. You may come across maybe nipple drinkers or the bell drinkers, and again, you, as part of the house profile calculations, you have to ensure that they're 45 centimetres clear of, that there's 45 centimetres clearance, which you possibly will get with the nipple drinkers and maybe not with the bell drinkers. But again, these have to be incorporated into your calculation of usable area. And in terms of nest boxes, then you again, 1 nest per 7 hens, or 120 centimetres squared per laying hens in the group nests. And as per the definition of usable area, nest boxes are not allowed to be included in that calculation, and that goes back to the definition in the Council Directive. So just in conclusion, it's important that all the relevant components be included and be measured accurately in terms of the house profile to give consistency in the figures. Any of the components may be limiting factors, so it may be anything from the usable areas through to the perches, the feeders, the nest boxes, that actually set the maximum capacity of the house. And that's why it's important that all of the components for which there are parameters set out must be measured. And this is all done in terms of ensuring the welfare of the laying hen. So both the organic regulations and the council directive go back to the protection of the laying hen. So just in terms of any further information, a lot of the relevant legislation that I've talked about you will find on the website there, urlx.europa.eu. And if you have any further queries that you haven't managed maybe to put on the chat or the questions today, if you email organicinspector@agriculture.gov.ie, they can pass them on to our division if they're relevant to us, and we'd gladly provide you with an answer. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'll pass you back to Seamus. Thank you.
Okay, Niamh, thank you very much. A very comprehensive presentation, giving an overview of the egg industry and the importance of registration of egg producers and how it's done and why it's done, and then an overview of the general overview of the layer house profile parameters. So next, my colleague Odile Evans is going to go into more detail as regards organic house profiles. So I'll hand it over to you, Odile. Thank you.
Thanks, Seamus. Okay. I'm hoping you can all see my screen now. I'll just put my webcam off.
We can see it, yes.
Perfect. So thank you, Seamus and Niamh. So as Seamus said, my name is Odile Evans, and I'm just going to go through the organic rules that are specific to layers. So the overall premise of the organic housing and husbandry is that the personnel keeping animals should be knowledgeable and skilled in terms of health and welfare needs. The husbandry should be designed that the developmental, physiological and ethological needs of animals are met, and animals should have permanent access to open air areas whenever weather conditions and state of the ground allow this. And also organic animals should be kept separate from other animals. So that's the basic premise of all organic husbandry and housing conditions, really. So in terms of the new organic rules, the legislation here is mainly 2018-848 and the implementing regulation 2020 of 464. And if you look at articles 13 through to 16, that's where it specifically goes into the details regarding poultry. So those are the URLX links, which you'll be able to get afterwards. So in terms of usable area, and Niamh has already kind of covered this, this comes from 9974, but it is referred to in Regulation 848/2018, and it's Article 3 there. So it's the length by width, and it has to be at least 30 centimetres wide, floor slope not exceeding 14 centimetres, and headroom of at least 45 centimetres, and the maximum limit is 6 birds per metre squared of usable area. And this is an important calculation because a lot of other things refer back to the usable area in terms of the organic legislation. At least a third of the floor shall be solid, and by that it means not of slatted or grid construction, and it must also be covered with a litter material such as straw, wood shavings, sand or turf. And again, that comes from 848. The veranda is a new one, and verandas in existing houses can be used to calculate the usable area until 2025. So there's a derogation provided for this, but any new houses built from January 2022 onwards must abide by the new regulation. So in order for the area under a veranda to be included in the usable area in new houses, they must be compliant with 464, and I'll go into that in detail in a minute. It's Article 15 of 464. So with existing houses, the derogation is, as I said, is provided to the 1st of 2025. So you can still use the veranda as the usable area in your calculations on existing houses. But with new houses, they are built from 2022. This will change. So the definition of a veranda, and this is also a roofed outdoor building. So they have to be insulated from the outdoor climate, fully accessible 24 hours per day. Air circulation, dust level, temperature, relative air humidity, etc. They must all ensure the well-being of the animals. And it also, it comes from 848, is that there should be plentiful natural ventilation and light able to enter the building, or the outdoor building, or the veranda as it happens. And the stocking density should provide for the animals' comfort. Pop holes must be easily accessible and have a combined length of 4 meters per 100 meters squared of the usable area of the minimum indoor surface of the outdoor building. So that's just the definition of what they mean by a veranda or a roofed outdoor building, in order to be able to include that roofed outdoor building in the usable area calculations in new builds. Pop holes must be of adequate size for the birds and must not have any obstacles for access, and if raised, a ramp must be provided, and the minimum sizing comes from 9974, and that is that they must be 35 centimetres high and 40 centimetres wide. From the indoor area to the veranda, the pop holes should be 2 meters per 100 meters squared of the usable area, and whereas from the veranda to the outdoors, at least 4 meters per 100 meters squared of the usable area. And this applies around that veranda area, but this applies for new houses built from the 1st of the 1st, 2022, and for existing houses from 2025. In terms of perches then, there must be perches or raised sitting levels in an organic poultry house. Minimum is 18 centimetres of perch per bird, and the horizontal distance between the perches must be 30 centimetres, and between the perch and the wall can be 20 centimetres, and that comes from 9974. In terms of multi-tiered houses, the maximum number levels in an organic house is 3, and that includes the ground floor level. They must be arranged to prevent droppings falling on levels below, and this is similar to what Niamh covered already. There must be a sufficient system of manure removal. A minimum headroom of between levels is 45 centimetres. All tiers should allow for easy inspection of the birds. And the point 1 there regarding the max number of levels applies for new houses from 2022 and existing houses from 2030, so that's slightly different to before. The derogation there is until 2030. In terms of mobile poultry houses, they can be used, but they have to be moved regularly during the production cycle, and they must be moved between each batch of poultry, because the limiting factor there is the amount of vegetation available to the birds. In terms of the outdoor area, the minimum requirement is that there must be 4 meters squared per bird, or a maximum stocking rate of 2,500 birds per hectare. So in terms of the house profile, this would require measuring the length and width of the overall area, and there can be no mixing of birds from separate compartments. And this all stems from Article 16 of 464. The open air areas cannot extend beyond the radius of 150 meters from the nearest exit or entry pop hole of the poultry house, but there is an extension of up to 350 meters from the nearest pop hole if there's sufficient shelter, and that is defined as at least 4 shelters per hectare. In terms of vegetation, for the organic regulation, open air areas for poultry should be covered with vegetation of a diverse range of plants, and this comes back to the husbandry and housing conditions, and that they have to have sufficient shrubs and trees, etc., to have shelter and ensure that they're opening or using the area in a balanced way. The maximum capacity is set out in Article 15 of 464, and it is 3,000 laying hens per compartment. So that is the limiting factor, no matter what all the other calculations come to. So that is my presentation. David, if I could exit the sharing function to open the actual house profile, the Excel sheet, that would be great.
When you have that open again, Odile, do you need to share again?
Yes, please. Yeah. Okay, can I share that now?
You should be ready to go there, Odile.
Is that working?
We can see your screen there now, your desktop screen.
Mm. Yeah,
Okay, you're in Excel there now. Yep, grand.
perfect. So this is the layers house profile that I circulated before this. So you see what Niamh and I have been talking about here. So there's something over 20 questions in it, but starting with the premises, flock number, the organic certification number, the construction date, and as you'll understand, that relates to the various derogations, the code for the house or the compartment code, the organic status, and that it's board being approved. We also have the internal dimensions of the house, floor area, dimensions of the veranda if applicable, because you can use that for the usable area at the moment. The usable area, and you'll all have this so far anyway. Perches, feeders, drinkers, nest box, and all the details that we've set out in those presentations are included here when you're filling it out. Pop holes, compartments, overall max capacity of the house, depending on those ones above. And then the total outdoor area, vegetation, and whether open runs are equipped with adequate shelter. And then there's a few details at the bottom here regarding multi-tier houses if you come across those. And that is what that looks like. So I can leave that up if you want for the Q&A function, if you want to take up any points within that. I'll pass it back to Seamus.
Okay, thanks, Odile. So yeah, if you can leave. If you can leave the form up there, please. There may be some questions. So if people have any questions, you can enter them by chat, and Niamh will field the questions. So maybe just to make a couple of points, and maybe Colm O'Brien wants to come in then. We'd ask OCBs, if possible, that these house profiles are completed in 2021, and a copy of the form is left with the farmer. It's only necessary to complete the form once. It's not a requirement that the form is completed on an annual basis. It's only necessary to do a new form if there's some changes made to the building which affects the capacity. But if there's no change, no kind of structural modification to the building, then the form only has to be completed once. We're talking here obviously about organic layer houses. There are different specifications for houses for meat production, poultry meat production, and in the near future we'll be looking at sending a pro forma for poultry meat houses. They're much more straightforward than layer houses, and there's much more kind of requirements and specifications pertaining to layer houses. So I don't see any questions coming up yet. Hopefully it's all fairly clear to everyone. Colm, have you any points you want to make?
Hello, Seamus. Hello, everybody there. No, I think you've covered everything there, Seamus. I've nothing further to add. Thank you very much.
Seamus,
Okay.
we just have a question here, if that's okay.
Yeah, good job.
Could you clarify a few points? So there are a couple of points, so I can take them, I'll give you them all together. Is there a size requirement for the nest boxes? Is one of the profiles required per house? And the third part of the question is there a deadline for the form to be completed this year or just by the end of the year?
Okay, thanks, Niamh. So as regards the first question, I'll hand it back to Odile. In a second, I'll endeavour to answer the second and third question. Yes, it's required that there's one form completed per house. Okay, so if there's obviously more than one house on the farm, a separate form must be completed for each house. The deadline for the form to be completed, no, we'd like if the forms can be completed by year end of this year. And going back to the question on nest boxes, I think the information is probably on the form you have there, Odile. Do you want to come in here?
So the nest box is the number of hens allowed is 7 hens per nest. But then for the group nest, the other stipulation is that there must be 120 centimetres squared per laying hen. So depending on the type of nest in the house.
Thanks, Odile. Any more questions?
And just on that question about the compartments, Seamus, I mean, this is designed that you can put in the house or the compartment code at the start of the form so that you know exactly what you're referring to.
Yeah. So, Niamh, have you seen any more questions?
No more questions at the moment anyway, Seamus.
Good. They seem to have answered all the questions there in the presentations. I see there's one more question there. Niamh?
Yes, Seamus, there's another question. Is there a minimum number of birds for which the organic house profile must be completed?
I'll hand that back to you, I suppose, because it's a general question to do with poultry house registration. So
Yeah, I can take that one, Seamus. There, Colm will break here. If you're using the term organic, even if you've just one organic hen, let's say take the extreme example, you must complete the profile. So the organic, just like free range, it's a protected term. You cannot use the term organic unless you're complying with organic specifications. So that's basically it. So ordinarily, we have rules there where if you've up to 50 hens, and you're selling directly door to door or at farmers markets, you don't have to register. But once you use a special term like free range or organic, even if you've just one hen and you're just selling that one egg to somebody, you have to register, and that's it. It's a special term, and you must comply with all the requirements of that special term, whether it be organic or free range or barn or whatever.
Seamus, we have one more. Do all aspects apply to the small mobile houses also?
The answer to that question is yes.
Seamus, another one. If the new regs are being implemented on the 1st of the 1st, 2022, are we expected to inspect those regs in 2021?
The new regs are coming into effect in 2022, so anyone housing, keeping organic laying hens in 2022 must be compliant with the regulations, and the houses must be compliant.
Just coming in there, Seamus, just to add that, am I correct in stating then that anybody even building a new house now in 2021 would have to build it to 2022 standards?
Oh, yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, well, as regards new houses versus existing houses, new houses must coming into effect in 2022 must be compliant with the regulation, and the regulation is 848/2018. That's the Basic Act, and then implementing Regulation 464/2020, which gives details on production rules and contains the housing requirements. So for new houses, they must be compliant with the new legislation, which comes into effect on the 1st January 2022. For existing houses, there are derogations there that an O'Deal has referred to the derogations pertaining to the veranda and other matters such as potholes and so on. And those derogations are contained in that Regulation 464/2020. And that's Article 26. So all the detail is in Article 26.
Okay, Seamus, a couple of more questions. Is the presentation going to be run or provided for organic poultry farmers also?
The record of the presentation itself has been recorded, so it'll be available to OCBs to use as they see fit.
Okay. Our existing houses, so I presume this is existing organic houses, and I think you've remarked on this already, going to be fully exempt from new regs, or are they going to be remeasured after the 1st of the 1st, 2021?
Existing houses, house profiles are needed for existing houses. So the house profiles need to be completed in 2021 for existing houses. And existing houses have to be compliant with the regulations. It's just that there are derogations for certain aspects as contained in Article 26 of Regulation 464. But the house profiles themselves need to be completed.
Okay, and the final one for the moment anyway, if feeders and drinkers are 45 centimetres off the floor, is that area acceptable as usable area?
Yeah, yeah, the definition of usable area was given by O'Deal, and that included the headroom of at least 45 centimetres. So that's the definition there, and the usable area has to comply with that definition to be allowed as usable area, which includes a minimum of 45 centimetres.
Seamus, there's no more questions at the moment anyway.
Okay, Niamh. Well, look, I think we've had a good session. There's been a very comprehensive presentations given by Niamh and Odile, and I want to thank Niamh and Odile for giving the presentations. And I want to thank the poultry unit for their assistance there in finalising the house profile form, and for the preparation of the presentation given here. So the presentation, a record of the presentation, is available for OCBs to use as they see fit. If there are any other questions, feel free to make contact with us. I want to thank people for coming along here. And finally, I want to thank Tom Fabosi and David Grant from DAFM Corporate Affairs for helping us here with this webinar. So thank you.